You can make $100,000 a year and still be financially fragile. You can make half that and feel surprisingly secure. The difference is often not income. It is how much money your life requires just to keep running. And most people increase that number without even noticing. Now, we talk a lot on this channel about dividend snowballs, compounding, living off dividends, replacing your salary, retirement, wealth building, and financial freedom. But there is something underneath all of those goals that we haven't talked about enough: financial stability. Because building a great portfolio is much harder when your lifestyle constantly demands every dollar you earn. Financial stability creates the margin and the peace of mind that allows investing to actually become a long-term process. And that is why today's topic belongs in this conversation. Your salary goes up, then household spending goes up. The car payment gets bigger. Subscriptions multiply, closets fill. The garage fills. Storage becomes necessary. And one purchase quietly creates another recurring obligation. That is how someone can earn more every year and still feel like there is never enough money left. The frustrating part is that most of the rules that prevent this are not complicated. You probably already know several of them. The problem is that they are easy to ignore because the financial damage happens slowly. One upgrade does not ruin you. One extra subscription does not ruin you. One impulse purchase does not ruin you. But repeated for years, those choices can build a lifestyle that consumes almost everything you earn. And that is what we are going to break down. Because one of the biggest threats to financial stability is something most people never calculate. The things you buy can keep costing you money long after you've paid for them. And that is only the first rule. By the end, you'll see why financial stability often has less to do with earning more, and more to do with how much of your income your life allows you to keep. If you enjoy conversations like this about money, investing, and building a more stable financial life, leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. It genuinely helps support the channel, and I really appreciate it. And stay with me until the end, because the final rule changes the way you measure wealth entirely. But first, we need to start with the rule almost everyone ignores because the price tag makes the purchase look cheaper than it really is. The first rule is simple: everything costs more than the price tag. When you buy something, you see the first cost immediately, the purchase price. What is easier to ignore is the second cost, everything that comes after you own it. Maintenance, insurance, repairs, storage, subscriptions, accessories, and sometimes your time. Take a $1,500 exercise bike. The purchase feels like a one-time $1,500 decision. But maybe it requires a monthly subscription, a floor mat, occasional maintenance, dedicated space in your home, and eventually repair or replacement. The same principle becomes even more obvious with larger purchases. A boat, recreational vehicle, or even another car does not simply have a purchase price. It can create insurance, registration, maintenance, fuel, storage, and equipment costs year after year. Suddenly, one purchase has created an entire stream of future expenses. And there is another cost that never appears on the receipt: opportunity cost. Suppose you spend $10,000 on something you barely use. The cost is not only the $10,000 that left your account. It is also whatever that money could have done elsewhere: building emergency savings, paying down expensive debt, investing, or simply giving you more financial margin. That does not mean every discretionary dollar should be invested. Money is also there to improve your life. The point is to recognize that ownership creates commitments, and those commitments accumulate. Ignore enough of them, and eventually a large part of your income is already spoken for before the month even begins. The price tag tells you what it costs to buy. Your lifestyle tells you what it costs to own. And that leads to one of the simplest ways to determine whether something expensive is actually worth the money. How much value are you getting every time you use it? The second rule is to stop judging value by price alone. Instead, look at cost per use. Imagine buying a $200 jacket and wearing it twice. That is effectively $100 per use. Now imagine buying a better $400 jacket and wearing it 200 times. That is just $2 per use. The cheaper item was not necessarily the better financial decision. And that is an important distinction. Minimalism is not about buying the cheapest thing. It is about buying things that earn their place in your life. The same applies to something like a home gym. If you spend several $1,000s on equipment and barely touch it, the cost per use is terrible. But if you use that same equipment consistently for 10 or 12 years, avoid recurring gym costs, and it makes exercising easier. It may turn out to be excellent value. Price tells you what you paid. Usage tells you what you received. And that leads directly to the third rule, the replacement test. Look at something you already own and ask, if this disappeared today, would I buy it again? That question can be surprisingly revealing. The clothes you never wear, the kitchen gadget buried in a cabinet, old electronics sitting in a drawer, hobby equipment you have not touched in years, even subscriptions you keep paying for but rarely use. If the answer is no, the item may still be in your life because of inertia, not because it still provides value. And you do not need to throw everything away tomorrow. Sell what has value. Donate what someone else could use. Cancel what keeps charging you. And for things that cost nothing to keep, sometimes the simplest decision is just not replacing them when they are gone. These two rules work together. Before buying, ask how much you will realistically use it. After owning, ask whether you would willingly pay for it again. That filters out a surprising amount of spending without requiring you to obsess over every dollar. But even when something passes both tests, there is another expensive habit that can destroy the value you already have: replacing something that never needed replacing. The fourth rule is one of the easiest to understand, and one of the easiest to ignore. Stop upgrading things that still work. Your phone works. Your TV works. Your laptop does everything you need. Your furniture is perfectly functional. Your car reliably gets you where you need to go. Then a newer version appears. Better camera, bigger screen, new design, more features. And suddenly, something that worked perfectly well yesterday starts feeling outdated today. That is where the upgrade cycle becomes expensive, because you are not always replacing something that failed. Sometimes you are simply restarting the purchase cycle before the previous one was finished. With a car, that can mean another round of depreciation and possibly another loan payment. With electronics, it means paying again for incremental improvements you may barely use. With furniture, it can mean replacing functions simply because the style no longer feels new. New is not the same thing as necessary. Of course, this does not mean keeping everything forever. Technology eventually loses software support. Cars become unreliable or expensive to repair. A laptop may no longer handle the work you need it to do. And safety, reliability, and functionality are legitimate reasons to replace something. The rule is simply replace when function, reliability, safety, or support no longer meets your needs. Not because novelty made something you already own suddenly feel inadequate. There is a big financial difference between replacing something because it stopped serving you and replacing it because you got bored with it. Boredom is expensive when you keep treating it like a maintenance problem. But knowing you probably should not buy the upgrade does not guarantee you will resist it, because modern spending is designed to make buying almost effortless. So the next rule is not about having more discipline. It is about changing the system before temptation shows up. The fifth rule is to stop relying on willpower. Modern spending is almost frictionless. Your card is already saved. Shopping apps are on your phone. Promotional emails arrive every day. And a purchase can go from impulse to confirmation in seconds. So if spending is too easy, deliberately make it a little harder. Remove stored card information. Delete shopping apps you constantly browse. Unsubscribe from promotional emails. And for non-essential purchases, create a simple 24 or 48-hour waiting period. That small pause forces you to answer a useful question. Do I actually want this? Or did something simply make me want it right now? But while spending should have friction, saving should work in the opposite direction. Make it automatic. When your paycheck arrives, have money. Move immediately toward the priorities you already chose. Your 401k, IRA, brokerage account, emergency savings, whatever fits your financial plan. The important part is that saving happens before the remaining money begins competing with everything else you could spend it on. And this matters because financial stability is not only about investing for 20 or 30 years from now, it is also about creating enough margin today that an unexpected expense does not immediately become credit card debt or force you to sell investments. That is why automation can be so powerful. You make the decision once, and the system keeps repeating it. You do not rise to your financial intentions every month. You usually fall to the system your accounts are already running. Make unnecessary spending slightly inconvenient. Make saving almost effortless. But automation only controls where new money goes. There is another problem it cannot solve by itself. Without boundaries, possessions have a tendency to expand with your income and with every available corner of your home. The next three rules all solve the same problem. Ownership tends to expand unless you give it boundaries. You do not need to count every object in your house. Just start with the categories that tend to grow quietly: clothes, shoes, kitchen gear, subscriptions, hobby equipment. If you discover that you already own 35 shirts, buying one more no longer feels like just another shirt. Now you can see the accumulation. That awareness alone changes behavior. For some categories, a simple one-in, one-out rule can help, not as a rigid lifestyle philosophy, just as a way to prevent things from expanding endlessly. The next rule is to rent or borrow before you buy, especially when the purchase is connected to a new hobby or occasional use. Camping equipment, tools, a kayak, camera gear, party equipment. Renting first answers two important questions. Will I actually use this enough? And do I even know what I really need yet? It is much cheaper to discover that a hobby was temporary before your garage is full of equipment from it. And then there is the bigger idea, the lifestyle multiplier. Some purchases do not add one expense. They create an entire expense ecosystem. A boat may bring insurance, registration, storage, fuel, maintenance, a trailer, and additional gear. A larger home can mean higher utilities, more furniture, more maintenance, and higher property-related costs. That is why the true financial decision is rarely, can I afford this item? A better question is, can I afford the lifestyle that comes with owning it? That one distinction can prevent a lot of recurring expenses from quietly becoming permanent. But there is an even bigger multiplier than a boat, a larger house, or any expensive hobby. It is the number that determines how much lifestyle expansion you will allow in the first place, your definition of enough. The ninth rule may be the most important one for long-term financial stability. Define what enough looks like before your income defines it for you. Imagine you earn $80,000 a year. Then your income rises to $100,000. Eventually, $130,000. On paper, you should be getting financially stronger. But each raise brings something with it. A better apartment, a newer vehicle, more expensive restaurants, more subscriptions, premium versions of things you used to be perfectly happy with. Soon the $130,000 lifestyle feels just as tight as the $80,000 lifestyle did. That is lifestyle creep. And the dangerous part is that it rarely feels reckless. Each individual upgrade seems affordable because your income increased. The problem appears when temporary income growth becomes permanent lifestyle growth. That is why defining enough matters. What kind of home is enough for you? What kind of car? How much clothing? How much travel? What recurring lifestyle actually makes you happy? These are not permanent limits you can never change. They are default standards that should change deliberately, not automatically every time your paycheck gets larger. Because something powerful happens when income rises, while your definition of enough stays reasonably stable. The gap becomes wealth. That gap can build emergency savings, pay down expensive debt, increase retirement contributions, build investments, or simply create enough financial margin that money stops feeling tight every month. And this is not an argument for austerity. Someone supporting a family in a high-cost city has a completely different financial reality from someone living alone in a lower-cost area. Housing, healthcare, debt, family size, and location all matter. The goal is not to freeze your lifestyle forever. It is to prevent automatic lifestyle inflation from consuming every improvement in your financial life. Enjoy some of the rays. Improve the things that genuinely improve your life, but make those upgrades intentional. Otherwise, you can spend decades earning more without ever creating much more financial breathing room. If income rises and your lifestyle rises just as fast, you became a higher earner, not necessarily a more financially stable person. And once you define what enough actually means, something else begins to change: your definition of wealth itself. The final rule changes the way you measure wealth. Do not ask only, "How much do I own?" Ask, "How many choices does my money give me?" Can you leave a job you hate? Handle a major emergency? Take time off? Help your family? Move? Retire earlier? Say no when the financial trade-off is no longer worth it? That is optionality. Someone earning $200,000 but spending $195,000 has very little margin. Someone earning $80,000 and spending $45,000 has much more relative breathing room. That does not make the lower earner richer in every sense. It shows that financial stability depends partly on the gap between your resources and your obligations. And protecting that gap requires maintenance. Do not wait for one massive decluttering every year. Regularly review what is entering your home, what is filling your closets and storage, which subscriptions remain active, and which recurring expenses you no longer value. Because the cycle works both ways. Less unnecessary spending creates more margin. More margin makes saving and investing easier. That builds greater security and reduces the need to express success through consumption. So take 3 things from this video. First, choose 10 things you own and ask, "If this disappeared tomorrow, would I buy it again?" Second, add 1 layer of friction to spending. Remove saved cards, delete a shopping app, or use a 48-hour pause for non-essential purchases. Third, define what enough looks like for your housing, transportation, clothing, and recurring lifestyle. These rules are easy to ignore because none of them feels life-changing today. But ignore them for years, and a good income can still produce a fragile financial life. Financial stability is not having enough income to support every impulse. It is building a life that leaves enough margin for income to become wealth. Own what improves your life. Stop paying for what merely occupies it. And measure wealth by the choices your money gives you, not by the things it helped you collect. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might benefit from it. And let me know in the comments, which of these rules have you been ignoring the most? Thank you so much for watching. God bless, happy investing, and I'll see you in the next video.